You obviously mentioned Hearst. Just briefly, who are the six media barons that you analyze in your book, their publications and their reach?
Right. Okay, so starting with first, as I mentioned, he had 28 newspapers. He had several large circulation magazines. He owned a newsreel company. He owned a movie studio that did fictional films. So he was, the original synergistic media baron. So he was the most powerful one, and he reached about 30 million people a week with his newspapers. And this was in a time when the United States population was about 120 million. So huge reach for him. And then I look at three other US media barons. They were a trio of cousins that had inherited a fortune from their grandfather. It was Robert McCormick, who owned the Chicago Tribune, and his cousin Joe Patterson, who owned the New York Daily News, which was a tabloid and was the best-selling newspaper in U.S. history then or since. And Joe's sister, Sissy Patterson, who owned the top-selling newspaper in Washington, D.C., the Washington Times-Herald. And then in the UK, I looked at the best-selling media baron at the beginning of the 1930s. That was Lord Harold Rothermere, who owned the Daily Mail, and the best-selling media baron at the end of the 1930s, who was Lord Max Beaverbrook, who owned the Daily Express. And collectively, these six media barons reached about 50 to 60 million Americans and Britons every week, and thus really helped set the tone for the political debate of the era.